Hello. I'm so excited for this panel. We've been talking more and more on rAVe Pubs about the intersection of ProAV and security. And today we're going to dive into enhancing compliance and safety. This panel is sponsored by ADI, so I wanted to thank them for putting this together. So let's jump right into things. And Cynthia, since you are sponsoring this, let's start with you and you can give us a little bit about yourself and the company.
Sure. Thanks so much, Megan. And I also want to thank Michael from Atlas for joining today as well, and some of our other guests too. And thank you for hosting us today as well. So just by way of quick introduction, Cynthia Mehta, I manage the ProAV business for ADI, both in the US and in Europe as well. I've been with the organization for 10 years. And ADI is a leading low voltage distributor of audio, security, fire solutions with over 100 locations across North America and also internationally as well.
And Michael?
Hey, so thanks for the opportunity to be here. I'm Michael Peebler. I'm the Vice President of Sales at Atlas IED. And I've been here for 5.5 years. I've been involved in education sales for 25 years that I've been in the AV industry. And I'm actually a former teacher. So I spent 8 years as a teacher before I got into the industry. So pretty passionate about the education space. So very relevant topic. Atlas IED, most people know us, 90-year-old company. Think of us as just, speakers and mic stands and racks and all of that. But about half of our revenue is directly out of the security and IT space, and very active in that market. So we deal with ADI. They're a great partner of ours, one of our best partners. And we do quite a bit of great work together with them. So thrilled to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you. And we also have Alan.
Hi, everybody. Alan Mendez here with Vector USA. Been with the company now for over 10 years. I'm one of the senior account managers here covering down on the DoD space, but doing tons of AV as well within that arena.
Great. So let's jump right into things. How has the intersection of AV and security evolved in recent years, particularly in the context of enhancing compliance and safety? And whoever wants to start, jump right in.
I'll talk about the merger from a product standpoint. We see integrators, whether they're AV, security, low voltage, crossing lines because they don't see lines and their customers don't see lines. So we see customers all the time where it's an AV integrator who's going out and doing audio in a dentist office, and they go, hey, by the way, we've got some security cameras. Could you hang those too while you're out here? And that's leading, it's simple little things like that, in addition to the acquisition of firms, both on the security of AV dealers and AV of security, and that type of thing. So we see this really becoming one integration market, not an AV market and a security market. There's still differences, but conceptually what both sides are doing is really crossing over. And from a compliance and standard standpoint, this is where companies like ADI are so valuable, because as an AV manufacturer, we're not familiar with the security compliance, but ADI can provide that kind of education and service.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I love your statement around not seeing lines. I think in addition to that, we are living in a networked world. So all the technology is sitting on, a very like platform, where security is talking to fire, which is talking to AV, and vice versa. And I think we've also seen a big convergence of the application of technology. So, mass notification, using and leveraging, digital signage for safety measures as well. So you're seeing these different applications kind of merge together and really becomes part of an overall technology platform, across the board.
Great. Alan, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I have nothing to add at this moment.
Okay. So the next question, what are some common misconceptions about integrating AV and security systems that you think should be addressed? Because I know you guys have both talked about, it's becoming more and more one industry, and people are like when I went to ISC West, like I saw so many AV people there. It's really crossed over, but maybe AV people aren't as well informed about the security industry. So what are some things they should know that are misconceptions?
I think from my side, I'll take a stab at this first. I think a few things, right? There are certain areas of security that require, a high degree of licensing, and that really does vary state by state and even city by city. So for an AV integrator who's getting into the security space, getting themselves involved in, the local security, market organization, Fire and Burg Association, et cetera, is a really good starting point to understand the requirements. With that said, there are many elements of security that don't necessarily have the high degree of licensing tied to it. So when you're thinking about CCTV, access control, et cetera, which are big, technology, segments within the security space, not the level of licensing. It's really life safety, where we see the requirements. And I think that is a big misconception amongst the AV integrator getting into it. They get a little bit turned off by the licensing piece of it.
Yeah, I would echo that. Literally, Cynthia read my mind. It is the fear of responsibility, of liability that tends to keep, I think, a lot of AV dealers away. I'll give you a simple example. So, what's a mass communication system in a corporate facility, right? Well, some people would say it's paging through a phone system, right? But that doesn't work very well in a room that needs larger volume, right? Because a speaker in a Cisco VoIP phone or something like that's pretty small, right? So when we come in as a manufacturer and we're working with that end user, we watch the battle between between dealer channels, because the AV guy looks at it and goes, "Mass notification, man, it sounds like security. I don't want to touch that liability." Right? The security guy looks at it and goes, "Microphones, amplifiers, speakers, that's AV."
Right.
Right. And so it's just that fear of the unknown and fear of the risk that I think keeps a lot of people from crossing the line more aggressively. And just to be candid, Megan, like, it's happening more aggressively coming from the security and low voltage side, getting into AV, than it is the other way because of that fear. It's an education issue. This is where you need to work with a partner that deals with both sides of that equation to learn. I tell dealers that all the time.
Agree.
So a little, I don't want to say commercial right now, but Michael as a manufacturer and Cynthia as a distributor, what are some ways you can help with that issue?
Education and pointing people in the right direction. I think we do a lot of that. Again, a commercial, but Cynthia and the ADI team are great partners for us. We do a lot of activity through them, a lot of revenue, a lot of projects, small and big alike. When I'm out meeting with dealer and they go, "Well, I'm nervous about this," because I'm like, have you reached out to ADI and talked to them? Right? Like, I'm not the best person to give you the answer, but they've got people they've got education, they've got information. Follow that route. So it's really just it's about saying, "Here, horse, is water, drink."
I think that when to that point, we can't do it without supplier partners that come forward with best in class technology and applications, like Atlas has done, and they've continued to really evolve and their lineup of products and new product introduction that applies not just in the safety space but across the AV space is really impressive. I think where we can also step into Michael's point is, we have services to help with design, right? We've got a full portfolio of products, not just, the audio side, the accessory side, the low voltage piece of it, to really cover off and help our customers, as we like to say yes to more business, and help them grow into new categories of business and applications. So, I would say it's not without our supplier partners and frankly, with folks like Vector, to take it, past the final mile, to get us to the finish line from an installation perspective as well. And I also think the other area, for someone who's getting into this space, don't be shy about leaning on peers, right? That peer-to-peer, networking with another integrator, maybe you don't want to get licensed today. if there's that fear factor, then there's certainly, we've got a wide breadth of resources and referrals that we can help with if people are requiring certain types of licenses and don't want to take that next step. So.
Ellen, do you have anything to add about what it's like on the integration side? Some common misconceptions you see from your peers?
I mean, from a integration side, what I would say is, and I always give this advice as you're entering into any new category of technology, whether it's a security guy getting to IT or AV guy, join security, start small, right? Don't let your biggest customer and their biggest project be where your starting point, right? Educate yourself, leverage resources. Don't be afraid to ask questions and lean on your supplier partners, your distribution partners. You're not in this alone, I think is also a good thing to understand, right? There's just a tremendous amount of, online education that it's available through supplier partners, on-site education that we can provide at a local ADI facility to help people, again, kind of crawl, walk, run into new applications.
So let's dig into my next question. There's a lot of talk about Alyssa's law. And so for those who don't know what it is, can you provide a brief overview? And then also talk about the implications for AV and security solutions, particularly in educational settings, which, Michael, I know is one of your favorite markets.
But, Alyssa's law is really a law that stems from, unfortunately, the tragedy at Parkland a few years ago. And it's aimed to provide quicker, and more efficient response times to such events. It's aimed at K through 12, so education is a great segue for Michael. And I think one of the big, maybe misconceptions of Alyssa's law is it's just about, really putting in a silent panic alarm in every classroom. Yes, that's a part of it. But the implications of that are a lot bigger. When you look at, thinking of the classroom, but go beyond the classroom, go into the school district. I mean, it's a technology platform that really does enable and is geared to prevent, such tragedies from taking place. And you see it with Alyssa's law. You see it with acts, even in the UK, like Martin's law, which is gained at high capacity, venues. But certainly a big effort to tie in safety enhancements, at schools and large venues as well. But I think I'll let Michael kind of talk to the impact around, schools and technologies that they employ.
Well, what I think Cynthia did a good job of describing what the intent of Alyssa's law is. Unfortunately, it's a really bad law, and the intent is right. The interpretation is wildly different. So only a certain number of states have adopted Alyssa's law today. Colorado's adoption of Alyssa's law is completely different than Texas, right? I live in Texas. If you look at Alyssa's law in Texas, it's 3 sentences. What does it mean? What it's become to be implied as Cynthia said, is you need a panic button in every room, right? Colorado's interpretation is you need a panic button on a wearable, basically panic button in every room on every staff member. So the point is to simply say, it's really important to understand Alyssa's law is not a federal law. Now there's talk of there being being on the federal floor and looking at a federal adoption, which would give us one interpretation of the law, and that would make life a lot easier for everybody. Right. But right now, what you have is New York, New Jersey, Florida, Texas, Colorado, others that are doing it are all doing it a little bit differently. So here's my big advice, really simple. OK, and I'm getting ahead with one of the questions, Megan, but that is this. If you're an integrator and you want to get involved in this from an AV or security standpoint, you need to understand the interpretation and requirement of the law, or the implied requirement of the law in your state. And if you're an integrator that does work in New York and New Jersey, you need to understand that interpretation may be slightly different, even though they're right next to each other, right? So right now, the lack of federal adherence on this creates a lot of ambiguity. So you need to understand what it is before you can walk in and talk about solutions. But that said, there are tons of opportunities for integration, right? To get those panic buttons in, to get wearables in. Wearables is probably one of the fastest growing components to the security world today, which is basically wearing something that looks like the card key that many of you scanned into work with today that has a panic button built into it, right? And there's variations on that too, right? Some people put them on microphones for teachers. There's all kinds of, it meets the standard, right? So it's an area we're doing a lot of work in. We have a hardwired way of doing it. We don't believe in wireless. Unfortunately, the largest lawsuit and one of the biggest tragedies we have in the United States was tied to a wireless system in my own state here in Texas. And so with that particular shooting, it really moved everybody away from the risk of wireless and really moving to more hardwired when possible. So anyway, Alyssa's law is a little bit of a chase to nail down. It's a little bit of a struggle to find, but make sure you understand what the interpretation is in your state, get educated on that, and then look and see what kind of solutions there are. States are putting requirements in at different paces. Some states haven't even touched Alyssa's law yet. So the market and the opportunity from a sales standpoint is still untouched. And so there'll be a lot of opportunity over the next year to 2 years.
Yeah, and I think law or no law, I mean, we have seen the rise of said events is tragic, right? And as an integrator, you should be talking about these, safety measures and the technologies and the platforms and informing and educating your end users, whether it's leveraging that law as a discussion point or B, in terms of just as they build out their technology platforms, talking to them about, AI and the use of AI through detection systems, panic alarms in schoolrooms, all the technology that's tied to, K through 12 or any other application for that matter to prevent incidents from happening and then allowing for faster response times.
Michael, I actually didn't know that Alyssa's law wasn't a federal law and it was state by state. Is there a deadline when people are supposed to implement this, or is it just up to each state then to go into it?
Yeah, pick a state. Everybody's got a different interpretation and a different rule. And candidly, without sounding bad, we actually have talked to the lawmakers that wrote the first version of it, and they even admit there's deficiencies in the way the law was written at that point. So it's something that's going to be modified. It's a moving target. Look, Cynthia said it, the world's not getting safer. And these problems aren't going to go away, and we're going to have to keep working towards a solution. And we're trying to figure out, we've legislated all the crimes. It hasn't stopped them. Right now, we're trying to find ways to legislate safety rules and implementation that can be put in, because we're tired of seeing what's happening in our schools. And it's K-12, but it's higher ed, it's industrial and manufacturing. We've got more of that coming back to the United States than ever before. But with that, we're seeing an increase in crime in those environments. And we've seen a lot of it even in the corporate space since COVID. So I think these are things that are going to rise up, and it would not at all surprise me because we have a lot of people who like to write laws and legislate stuff. If we don't see the requirement for these kind of systems to move beyond K-12 up into other environments, particularly if they're tapping federal finances. And typically when laws like this get passed, there is federal money to go with it. Sometimes those are partially funded mandates. So here, you got to go do it. Here's $20, go get it done. And sometimes they actually give them the money they need. And it just depends. I live in a state that's famous for partially funded mandates. Here's the requirement. Here's 50% of the money you need to get it done. Good luck. Get it done by January or you're all fired.
Before I get into the next question, I want to bring on another panelist, Chase. Chase, if you could just introduce yourself quickly.
Hey, is the audio coming in okay?
Yep.
So Chase Zuckerman, I'm the GM of our federal team here at Vector USA. So we, everything from Department of Defense to government civilian agencies, and work with federal system integrators. Ultimately reports to my team. Alan Mendez is one of my team members who covers down on most of Marine Corps, or all of our Marine Corps, and a little bit of our Navy enterprise customers as well.
Thanks for joining us. So the next question, and Michael, you alluded to that this was going to be the next question. You know, we've been talking about laws and regulations. What are some ways that institutions can ensure that their AV and security systems remain compliant? Because everything is continually evolving, and as new technology comes in, standards change. And I know you both have mentioned, you and Cynthia have both mentioned, you know, working with people that know that, like resources at ADI.
Yeah, I think from my perspective, it's, you know, again, the local, you know, from an organizational perspective, you've got, you know, groups, you know, AVIXA and, you know, the Fire and Berg associations, et cetera, that can provide an awful lot of guidance around and resource around, you know, regulations, compliance, et cetera. You know, again, when you look at the security side of the house, you certainly have to drill, you know, very local and make yourself familiar. But again, I think you can leverage on resources to make those introductions and to provide guidance, so that you're not, you know, as some might say, reinventing the wheel in terms of where you're starting. You know, we can certainly, as Michael said earlier, you know, lead a horse to water and provide the resources and guidance and connections.
Yeah, all I would add is this. I'm not as worried about the end users knowing, because they've usually got someone at the state level, Department of Education, who is saying, this is what this means to you. Again, that may be a little bit of an evolving target, but that's the official agency that's going to hold them accountable to meet that requirement, right? So what I worry about is the integrators that walk in that aren't educated, and they disqualify themselves because they don't know the right questions to ask. Get educated. Take the time to learn. There's this thing called Google. There's a lot of information out there on it, and you can find a lot of what's going on in your state or in your, you know, municipality and what they're doing, and just get a good education before you walk out, and understand how your particular part of the world is interpreting that rule or what they're focused on doing. That would be my recommendation.
Chase or Ellen, what about from your viewpoint?
In what context? Like,
how do you stay up to date with all the evolving regulations and standards?
So, and again, from our space, right, it's a little bit different. So the space that we covered down in, from a regulation standpoint, a lot of what we have to address from a federal, especially Department of Defense regulation and standard, has to do with segmenting, you know, classified versus non-classified, top secret versus secret level traffic. Completely different. It's not that they don't have emergency notification issues going on, like barracks. There is a very common area for need for emergency notification, PA, things of that nature. But it isn't mandated, and the regulations aren't the same when we're talking about DoD, right? They're things that they acknowledge are a pain point. But really, the most critical thing that we're talking about with our customers actually has to do on the cybersecurity side, which is, you know, A, where are the components made? B, who's handling the data, and how is it being processed? How is it being encrypted? What type of encryption is occurring? How many times is it being encrypted? How are we keeping the traffic segmented? And the way that we keep up to date, frankly, it's A, a lot of conversation with our customers. B, it's a lot of research and discussion with the OEMs. I mean, we're constantly just, you know, having conversations with various OEMs to understand like how their technology actually works. So that in our space is most of the conversation nuance from a regulation standpoint. I could see down the line, even in the short midterm future, there being more stringent regulation around is in a more similar sense to what the K-12 space is doing with like Alyssa's law on a state by state. But right now, the federal government is behind with their own, with their own employees, so to speak, at least in on the DoD side.
Okay, last question. how do you foresee emerging technologies like AI and IoT influencing the future of AV and security solutions? And Michael, I want to start with you because Atlas ID has IntelliSea now, and I think that's a neat solution, and you can kind of loop that in and talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. So, when you say AI, it tends to terrify people. They think it's going to start making decisions for them and tell them what to think and what they can have for dinner tonight and stuff. But it's really amazing. We're not the only company that's doing it. There's others as well, but we invested in a company called IntelliSea. IntelliSea is an AI camera technology. It works on any IP camera. So it's an appliance that sits on the network, and it analyzes. It's a deep learning. We call it AI, but it's really a deep learning machine tool. And what it's doing is it's analyzing literally millions of images per second. So we can identify certain things that the model is trained on to alert on. So let's start with something really simple, because everybody wants to get to the glamorous, but let's start with the simple. Falls. Okay. So the insurance industry pays $1 billion a day on fall claims in the United States. The average payout for a fall claim is $50,000, and the statute of limitations for a fall claim is 6 years. So if anybody wants to go practice your falling technique and you want to go back and claim that you fell somewhere in 2019 right before COVID happened, you're still eligible. And if you get a lawyer, you can probably get a $50,000 settlement from the insurance company. What this does is allow us to find somebody, identify as soon as someone falls. That's interesting because we can now see that on a camera, get an alert on that. Think about how many cameras that a university has or a K-12 environment has. How many hours is somebody manning those cameras? Very few, right? In fact, unfortunately, more often than not, cameras are used for a prosecuting attorney after an event than they're used to actually stop something. Now, with this deep learning tool, we can take this all the way up to identification of a weapon. So I live in Texas. No one's going to assault a school with a handgun. People always say, well, if they put it in a backpack, yeah, they're going to pull an AR out of the backseat of the pickup truck. Sorry, we've seen it too many times. We know what happens. As soon as we see them in the parking lot with that weapon, we can lock the school down. So that's the impact that AI starts to have, is when we see it and get confirmation that that's a weapon and that person's headed towards a building, we can lock the access lock system. We can start announcements with speakers in the parking lot, blasting them, telling them that authorities are on the way and warning everyone to get down into a lockdown process, right? And then we can notify everybody on that campus, or whether that's an industrial campus, whether that's a corporate building, whether that's a school, right? That can tell people in parking lots, practice fields, gymnasiums, classrooms, hallways, any of that kind of stuff, that there's a weapon on campus. Whether they've shot or not doesn't matter. As soon as they brandish a weapon, they've made a decision that day. And we work with SWAT officers as part of our company. And they've shared with us what that decision is. We won't get into that today, but the minute they pull that weapon out on that parking lot, they've made a decision. And the idea of having AI camera technology actually get that notification and get that into a system that can start the events, that can go all the way to the 911 app that first responders use, that's incredible, right? So it's the closest thing to prevention before a weapon is used that we've ever seen. And it's still learning because it's AI. So it's deep learning. So it will keep being trained on new things. So we're super excited about AI, not because we have it, but candidly, our mission at Atlas IED is to save lives. And if this gives us the ability to do that, then we are all behind it. Sorry to hog the time. That one I'm super passionate on what we're doing with AI now.
Thank you guys so much for joining me today. We're actually out of time. And Michael, I think that was a perfect ending, because that is one way that AI is actually going to change things, and not just that we think it will. Before we go, I just want to give you guys a chance to share where people can find you after this if they want to connect with you. Chase, let's start with you.
Sure. I mean, I can post my email in the chat. I'm actually, I think somebody in my generation, fairly unplugged when it comes to social media. So better just to reach out directly to my email is the best way to get a hold of me. Or happy to put my cell phone in here as well.
Alan?
Same with Chase. I can definitely share my email address if anybody wants to connect with me.
Perfect. Michael?
Yeah, you can find my email address on atlassied.com. Under the contact us page, all my contact information's there, phone numbers there, emails there, or you can find me on LinkedIn under Michael Piefler.
And Cynthia?
Yes, so I think a shameless plug for the Vector crew. They can also check out their website too. I think it's vectorusa.com. For ADI, it's adiglobal.com. I certainly have a LinkedIn profile that you're welcome to connect with me on LinkedIn as well. But you're welcome to kind of browse by category on the ADI Global website. You can check out and download our ProAV solutions as well.
Thank you guys so much for joining me, and thanks again to ADI and Cynthia for making this panel possible. Now let's check out this quick video from ADI before we jump into our next session, where they're going to discuss sustainable practices for network video distribution.